Hi, my name is Tabby Shah, and today my presentation is on the one car that rules the world, Ferrari, who has 75 years of history because they were founded in 1947. So let's get into some of their history. First off, I'd like to introduce you to Ferrari by acquainting you with their logo, which you'll be seeing a lot throughout this presentation. And on the left side of your screen, you'll see the 1991 Ferrari Testarossa. So why did I choose this car? One thing, I wanted to choose a little bit of an older car. The 90s were about 30 years ago, so this car has definitely aged some bit. Um, as you can see, it's definitely showing its age on the outside. It's very much a 90s aesthetic, and I don't think it holds up as much as some older cars do, but at the time it was very cutting edge, it was very modern, and it looked very much like the aesthetics of the time. Honestly, this car holds a very big spot in my heart. I absolutely love the stripes on the side and I love the pop-up lights. It's actually holding space in a lot of people's hearts right now because there is a new wave of people who want the Ferrari Testarossa, as shown in its value. Before it was about $100,000, and right now it's actually climbing to a little bit higher than 100,000 because there's a lot of Ferrari fanboys who want the car, which honestly I can totally see because the inside of the car is amazing. We have a red suede interior and some leather seats. So the car, I would say on the interior looks quite modern. The only thing that looks not as modern in it would be the speedometers in the middle, as you can see, because most modern cars are replaced with an LED digital screen. But I think it holds up really well on the inside. I think the outside definitely doesn't hold up that well, but the inside, especially looking at even the gears, it's such a beautiful car. And I say if I had $100,000, I definitely want to buy this car. It looks amazing. So let's break down the logo that you saw on the last slide. Enzo Ferrari only told the story once of how the logo came to be. So, in his words, in 1923, he met Count Enrico Baracca, the hero's father, and then his mother, Countess Paul, oh my gosh, Paulina, Countess Paulina, who said to me, "One day, Ferrari, put my son's prancing horse on your cars, and it will bring you luck." So, who is this hero whose parents love him so much? That hero is Francesco Baracca, who was a famous airman during World War I. Though he died quite young, he was a top fighter with 34 victories and is remembered very fondly in Italian history. So, this is Francesco in front of his plane, and as you can see, there is a prancing horse. The next thing that you'll notice about the logo after you see the horse is that you'll see the yellow background, the canary yellow background. So they say that the color yellow comes from the color of Moderna, but also I think it's slightly inspired by the fact that the color the plane Enrico flew, sorry, not Enrico, Francesco flew, was this very beautiful canary yellow. And as you can see, that is Francesco's plane in color. Next, we have the shield or box that contains the horse and the color. So originally, the yellow shield was painted on the side of the Alfa Romeo racing cars. And then once Ferrari started producing cars in the 1940s, it was on the sides of the 125s, and the logo was actually in the shape of a box instead of the shape of a shield. As you can see here, this is the Alfa Romeo racing um, vehicle, and you can see again, it's the shape of the shield and the horse. You'll be able to see a slightly better detailed photo of this logo a little bit later. So at the very top of the logo is the Italian flag, and this was added slightly later than the first original um, logo, but it's something that is very striking to it. So again, at the very top, there is the colors of the Italian flag, which you will see right now. So in the late 20s, early 30s, it was a black, red, and white with the SF at the bottom, standing for Scuderia Ferrari, which was painted on the sides of the racing cars. 31 to 39, again, um, we're still in the racing era. We don't have any Ferraris actually being manufactured, and this is the start of the Italian flag at the top, and still the shield shape. So once they started producing cars, they went to a rectangular shape, and instead of the S and the F, we have a Ferrari at the very bottom of the screen. And then the tail also kind of split. Instead of having it as one big thing, we have a tail going up and then a slight bit going down. The 80s brought on a slightly bolder look of the logo. The horse is a little more centered and a little bit smaller, with the Italian flag being a little more present. But again, there isn't a lot of changes between these. The 90s brought on two separate logos that can be seen. It also brought on the idea of digital uses, which is why you can see that these logos are a little more clear, and they're able to be vectored and put onto different things like merchandise, which is where it stops at 2002. And currently we have the Ferrari logo. Again, shield and rectangular, and there's not a lot of changes here except for the fact that a couple of the lines were removed and the colors are a little bit bolder. Same thing with the highlights on the horses. Again, there just isn't much change between these logos. Again, we can see the slight changes in shapes, but even then, the shield shape was original Ferrari, and the rectangle only came about 10 years later than the original, Ferrari logo that was painted on the sides of race cars. And I think this is what's really interesting and what sets Ferrari apart and why Ferrari is so dominant and why their logo is so known. Because the logo has not changed in 75 years. Um, Same canary yellow, same horse, same positioning of the horse. Um, Honestly, I think if someone from the 40s came and saw the Ferrari logo today, they would easily recognize it. And I think the Ferrari logo won't change because it's what makes Ferrari Ferrari. I think it'll slightly modernize, I think it'll slightly refine itself, but there's no big changes, unlike what a lot of other cars or what a lot of other brands are doing currently, which is modernizing their logo to a point to make it very minimal. But I think the reason the Ferrari logo works so well is because it is a little more of a jam-packed logo. I definitely don't think it's maximalist by any means, but there are three different things the logo, right? You have the stallion, you have the flag, and then you have the name. And I don't think that's to the detriment of the logo itself, and I don't think it makes it look um, old. I don't think it makes it look less modern. I just think it's what Ferrari is, and I love that they've decided to hold to their roots so strongly and not change their logo when a lot of other car manufacturers are doing that to help appeal to, I guess, the modern day. So where can you see the Ferrari logo? On the left side of your screen, you can see the Ferrari actually has a clothing line. It's a luxury clothing line, and that shirt will cost you about $600. In the middle, we have the Ferrari Ray-Bans collection. This is actually the Ferrari Formula One Ray-Ban collection. In the bottom right, we have a Ferrari cologne that will run you about $20. And in the very right of your screen, you have Charles Leclerc, who currently races as one of the drivers for Ferrari. Each Formula One team gets two drivers, and Leclerc is one of them, and then their other driver is Carlos Sainz. But during this presentation, we're going to focus a little more on Leclerc because he was number one in the races for this year for a little bit, and he's a very good driver. And I just like him, so we're just going to see him a lot more. But that's also another place you'll be seeing the logo, which is in Formula One. So let's talk about marketing. Again, back to Formula One. This year, there's about a 1.4 million average views per race, which is up almost 50% from 2021. And I imagine this figure will be climbing a lot more as more people watch it. More people tell their friends and they watch it as groups, and it's just really interesting. Actually, one of the races, I believe Miami, had over 2 million viewers on average for that show, which is absolutely insane. Next, we have pop culture. So, looking for the word Ferrari in songs, there's over 9,000 separate songs that have the word Ferrari. On top, we can see that one of the Migos, I believe it's Future, um, Future in his Ferrari. Uh, Again, pop culture. He's a rapper. He raps about being in his Ferrari. There's a music video where he's in a Ferrari. And that just reinforces the idea of Ferrari for free, by the way. This is free advertisement for them. Going to more free advertisement, we have influencers. People like looking like they have a Ferrari, I guess. If you're rich enough to have a Ferrari, you probably want to share that with your friends and you want to post it on Instagram for all of your fans to see. And next, because people want to have a Ferrari so bad, people are renting Ferraris to take photos with them, to shoot music videos with them. And then that's just more free marketing because it's suddenly Ferraris are now in the hands of people who can't afford it. And it still has an air of exclusivity because these people, these influencers, are trying to create a brand for themselves, a brand of being rich. So it doesn't it doesn't water down the brand itself. It actually helps improve the brand and their, I guess, exclusivity and air of being rich. And then next we have notoriety. Ferrari is the expensive brand. It's why people like flexing in front of Ferraris because when you see a Ferrari logo, you think money, you think expensive, you think sleek, you think race car. And I think because live in a culture where that is, they're so interconnected, expensive car and Ferrari, it's cyclical where when someone says they want to win the lottery and that the first thing they do is buy a Ferrari to a group of people, that cycles in the idea that Ferrari is expensive and that Ferrari is something that you want to have. Repeat the cycle for 75 years, and then you have a car that's dominant in pop culture, that's dominant in our vocabulary, that we talk about all the time because everyone wants a Ferrari. It's what they're known for. So let's talk a little bit about Formula One and Ferrari and international marketing and how sometimes it can be very good and sometimes it can be very bad. So, first off, I'd like to talk about three of my friends that are from very different backgrounds. So, one of my friends at the top is very into Formula One, one of my friends in the middle has no clue about cars, and then the one on the bottom actually works in racing. So, at the top, I just asked them, hey, when I say the words Ferrari and Formula One, what do you think? And there's some main topics that I'd like to talk about that kind of come up throughout this, but I'm just going to read out their quotes first. So, first off, we have my friend who's into Formula One, and he says, Ferrari is the oldest Formula One team and the most successful. So many legends have raced for Scuderia, and it's ingrained in the minds of all Formula One fans. When I think of Ferrari, I think of Charles Leclerc screaming no after a crash. He was at one point leading Formula One with a 50-point lead, but he's now behind 60 points and has no real chance of winning the season. His team has let him down. Friend 2 doesn't know about Formula One, which is okay, and friend 3, who works in racing, says Ferrari is Formula One. People forget this, but Ferrari was dominant from the 90s to the beginning of the hybrid era. Furthermore, Ferrari is the only team on the grid that's actually been in every year of competition. Formula One and Ferrari does not exist without the other. So I guess one of the main themes that we see here is that Ferrari isn't doing too hot, or they were, and then they're just not doing anymore. So again, Ferrari is Formula One. They've been in there forever, and they were dominant. They're known as a winning team from the 90s to the beginning of the hybrid era again. But right now, they're not doing good. They've had some scandals. Um, but I want to go back to the top quote. And Charles Leclerc recently, who was at number one, as you can see, had a crash, and his team has let him down. Or his cars has let him down, but it's reflected on the team, right? So recently, Ferrari has been making some bad calls, losing Charles Leclerc some places, and actually, Carlos Sainz, the other racer for Ferrari, had an engine explode, and Charles Leclerc had a clutch failure, leading him to go into the wall and lose a race. So this is really interesting because when Ferrari is dominant, when Charles Leclerc is on top, that is a bunch of good press for Ferrari. There's a bunch of racing news articles written about Charles Leclerc and how good of a driver he is, and how good Ferrari's strategy is, and how good Ferrari is by proxy, essentially. But when Ferrari does bad, when an engine explodes, when a clutch fails, that's negative press for Ferrari, and fans know that. And again, Charles Leclerc blowing such a lead, or not him blowing such a lead, but his entire team blowing such a lead, reflects awful on Ferrari. And I think that's Ferrari's risk in being in Formula One, because unlike Alfa Romeo, who has their name on the team but isn't super involved, Ferrari is super involved because Ferrari is Formula One. Um, all of Ferrari's team of engineers is from Ferrari. Their cars are from Ferrari. They're manufactured by Ferrari. And while the main consumer is not buying a race car, they're buying a car from Ferrari, who's known for making race cars. And so when you see their team of engineers make a mistake and have an engine explode, even though it's not the same car you're driving, you can't help but think of, will that happen to me? Are the engineers as good as they say? Is this as good of a car? Because if your main job is to win a race, why are your cars failing? Um, so I just think that's really interesting that, Ferrari is taking this risk, and right now the risk isn't paying off. It's not in their favor. It's bad for them. So I hope that they can recover. But if the season goes as how it's been going for the second half of the season, I don't think it's good. And I think it's a bunch of negative press for them. And again, a lot of fans are talking, and a lot of press is talking about how Ferrari was doing good, but now it's bad, and that isn't going to reflect good on them. And I think it's going to change a couple consumers' minds. Will it change every consumer? No. But if people want a Ferrari and they want a reliable car, I feel like they're not going to pick a car who's, not doing the best in Formula One. Let's talk about the logo and the country image effect. So, Ferrari is Italian. We know that Ferrari is Italy. There is no doubt where the car is from because Ferrari proudly displays the Italian logo at the top of their logo. Sorry, the Italian flag at the top of their logo. I think it's really interesting that Ferrari has stuck with a more maximalist logo, a more stylized logo, I guess is the best way to put it, because the logo shows everything it needs to show. The name sounds Italian. The name is written on the bottom of the logo. That is another indication that the car is Italian. And Italy is known for their racing car scene. Again, Ferrari is known for racing. Ferrari and Italy, very interconnected. Italy is sleek, timeless, and elegant. And do you know what else is sleek, timeless, and elegant? The Ferrari logo. As you can see, they haven't changed it because there's no need to change it. It's sleek, it's timeless, it's elegant. It can be used for racing, it can be put on a hat, it can be put on perfume. And also, the logo carries Italian history. The logo was made after a Italian legend. And again, back to the Italian flag at the top, there's no doubt that this logo is Italian. There's no need to look into it because it shows you loudly and proudly that it is. Let's talk about demand for a second. Ferrari's pretty tight-lipped about where they sell their Ferraris to. So I tried my best to give you some figures and try to give you the most accurate places, but some of these are a little off. So first off, the Americas are by far the biggest demander for Ferraris and the biggest acceptors. Gifters? What's the word? They receive the most Ferraris. There we go. So they have 2,831 cars sold. And so this is all of the Americas. So that could be Mexico, Canada, America, Brazil, Chile. But I'm just going to say a majority is in America, and then I'll explain why a little bit later. But I don't doubt that there's definitely a couple Ferraris in Canada, a couple Ferraris in Mexico, a couple cars in the Southern Americas. Next, we have Germany leading Europe with 1,252, Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan with only 899. But what's so interesting is that they've actually doubled the amount of Ferraris in 1 year. And so, why is this important? Because Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan, this figure shows that they're bouncing back from COVID because these stats are from 2021, which is a year after the COVID pandemic. So, who knows what these stats will look like now because they are a little changed due to just economic factors that have happened in the last 2 years. But I just think that's really interesting to point to. Next, we have elsewhere. The Middle East has 334, cannot read numbers today. And then the EMEA, which cannot remember what it stands for, but essentially what it means is that if you were to draw parallel lines from about the United Kingdom straight down and then about just encompassing all of Africa, just straight down. That's where these cars are being bought. So that could be Africa, that could be, Europe, that could be part of Russia. So we don't know exactly where these cars are going. We just have a vague estimate. But again, that's not the majority. So back to the Americas. 2,831 cars sold. I believe that a lot of these are going to America simply because America has a very high GDP average. They have a lot of millionaires, a lot of billionaires. And I think we do really have an image that we want to keep up for ourselves. I think that we like the idea of showing luxury. We're very to give a word to it, I think we're very new money. In one of the readings, I believe in a video actually, they talked about how Maserati is for the fathers, but Ferrari is for the sons. Because we do like showing our wealth, we do like boasting it. I think if you were to go around to Beverly Hills or Los Angeles, you'd see a lot of Ferraris because people like showing that off. Also, I think that we have a lot of land to cover. Um, in other countries, cars aren't as needed. There's a lot of public transport, but in America, we need cars. America's huge as well. Even getting from the top to the bottom of California is gigantic and it's a lot of ground to cover. So you would need a car more than if you were to be in a European country with slightly better public transport. But speaking about European countries, let's talk about Germany for a second and why, even though the Americas is number one in total cars, I think Germany should be number one on this list because Germany has a lot smaller of a population than America, but they have a huge demand for cars, right? I would say Germany's about the size of an American state. Um, so per capita, I guess the best term would be Ferrari per person. Um, Percentage is very high compared to America, or a lot higher than America. And one reason why could be, again, just the GDP issue about how there's a lot of richer people in or in Germany than there is in other places. But also, I think the Autobahn helps. The fact that you have a car that can go 300 miles an hour and then you're in a place that allows you to go that high, right? You buy a racing car, but what's the point of using it if you can't go to racing speeds? Because in America, we have speeding limits, and then if you wanted to go above those, you couldn't stay in, I guess, more urban places. You would have to go to the middle of nowhere and hope again you didn't get caught by a cop. But in Germany, the Autobahn allows you to use your car at full potential, the potential that it was supposed to be used at, but you can't when there's speeding limits. So I think that's really interesting why Germany does have such a high number of Ferraris, and I think that's one of the reasons. Let's talk about a very popular logo. So why would people want the Ferrari logo on different items? I think that people want luxury without having to spend a lot. I think it's kind of an in club, right? Again, it's like it's showing your appreciation that you like it. It looks cool. It just it's very interesting because when you wear a Ferrari hat, everyone knows that you can't afford a Ferrari most of the time, right? But you want a piece of Ferrari because the logo looks cool. I think a big thing is the fact that the logo is just so unique and it's so striking. It's just a good logo to look at, and it's almost like, I guess, a Gucci logo, in the way that you're just like showing it off. It just looks good. That's why the monogram is such a popular look because even if it's, I guess, a Michael Kors bag or even like, I guess, a Walmart bag, like a knockoff Michael Kors Walmart bag, the look of having branding just looks pleasing to some people, and I think that's why people like it. Again, so as you can see on your screen, this is actually the Puma Formula One collection with the Ferrari logo on it. So this isn't by Ferrari, it's more for showing support for their Formula One team in the way that I guess a jersey would be for an NFL team, right? But I think it's really interesting because I think that Ferrari needs to pump the brakes a little bit with the handing out of their logo, because I believe that their brand is starting to get watered down because this hat is kind of expensive. It's about $50, which I think is an okay deal. But there's a lot of other places the Ferrari logo is that's a lot cheaper. And I think that Ferrari cares about their logo so much when it's on a car, but when it's on someone else as a piece of clothing. I don't think they care as much, and that's causing the brand to fizzle out. Because I think that what makes the Ferrari logo so interesting and so exclusive is that you don't see it often. I don't see a Ferrari logo ever, but it's recognizable. So I think you have to find the balance between having the logo in just enough places that people know it, but not seeing it enough that it waters down the idea of it on a car. And I think that's what Ferrari has had for a very long time. I remember seeing a Maserati when I was at Meyer and not knowing what the car was. And I think that's, Ferrari is a very loud luxury. You buy a Ferrari because you want to show that you can afford a Ferrari, that you can get on the list and you can get one. And I think that's why people like it so much. But when it's in different areas, I don't think it definitely loses its flair after a while, I guess is the best way to put it. And I'm going to go back a few slides to show what I think is the perfect collaboration and what Ferrari should be looking for. So in the middle here, we have the Ray-Bans Ferrari collection. And this is where I think Ferrari hit the nail on the head. So not only is this Formula One and Charles Leclerc, but this is luxury. Ray-Bans are a luxury sunglasses. They're luxury sunglasses. They are the Ferrari for sunglasses. And so they're on the same level. It's not Puma, because Puma is, everyone can get a Puma for the most part. And so that means Ferrari and Puma aren't on the same level. And when they're not on the same level and Ferrari's going towards a brand that is lower than them, that doesn't bring the brand that's lower than them higher. It brings Ferrari lower. It waters Ferrari down. But when Ray-Bans and Ferrari are on the same level, there is no bringing down a Ferrari. It's just Ferrari on glasses. And I think it's really nice that it's very silent, it's very subtle. There's a little Ferrari logo that you can't see, but it's not very loud, right? Also, I think it helps that Charles Leclerc is kind of attractive as well. I think he gives a very good look to the brand. but that's just another thing. I think another reason why that Ferrari is certainly getting a lot more attention now. Charles Leclerc is a young new upcomer who was doing very well. And so again, that's just more positive brand reinforcement, which is something I guess out of their control. They just want to pick a good driver, but it definitely doesn't harm Ferrari. So again, I just think that having a good amount of brand control, because once it's out there, you can't control what happens to your brand. You can't control who puts shoes on your car. But again, it's easier to control it when it's put on Instagram than it is someone's hat. So if I was at Ferrari in charge of marketing, I would pump the brakes because it is starting to water down a little bit. So why did I pick Ferrari? And let's talk a little bit about a reflection. So I was pretty much adamant about not picking Ferrari for this presentation. I remember looking at the module and looking at our presentation that we'd be doing and saying, yeah, I'm not doing Ferrari. I'm doing someone else a little bit more underground. But the more I learned about Ferrari and the more I was told by a friend who is into Formula One, the more I started liking it. Because I think the connection between Ferrari and Formula One is so interesting on a brand standpoint. Because Ferrari is very much taking a risk. Because if another engine blows, that's just another minus 10 points in people's consumers' mind about Ferrari. And I just think there is so much history behind Ferrari as well that it's very interesting. And I don't think Ferrari is going away anytime soon. And I think Ferrari is very smart. I or they have been very smart. They've been winning races, but they're not winning races now. And they have been very smart. And I don't know if their brand is very smart right now, but I do think that they aren't fading out anytime soon because we do have such a big connection to Ferrari. And because Ferrari has stopped their 10K limit on the amount of Ferraris sold, and there's still a big demand, and there's still people who want a Ferrari but can't get it. There's still an air of exclusivity. So this brings me to I wouldn't buy a Ferrari, but maybe I would. So I told all of my friends that I asked these questions to, I was like, hey, if I gave you the money right now to buy a Ferrari, would you buy it? All of my friends said no, which I think is very interesting because I think if you told me that, I would probably say yes. But the more I learn about Ferraris, the more I don't really want one. They're very expensive and not super reliable. They're very expensive to repair. The maintenance is awful. Again, my friend who works on cars. Basically, they aren't the most reliable car as we've seen in Formula One, and I guess Formula One is a very good indicator of what they are like as a consumer car. But I think if you had the money to buy a Ferrari, you wouldn't really mind having to buy foreign parts. You wouldn't mind having to get a tow truck to the nearest Ferrari dealer, which I imagine is quite far away because there aren't that many Ferraris in the world. Um, and I don't think they'd mind an expensive repair, but it is kind of annoying, especially to have your car go far and then have it break down on you, because I think a big part about having a car is reliability. But again, it is a status symbol, and I think it'd be kind of fun to drive it around because there's an air of exclusivity. It's very much an in club that almost everyone around you wants to be in. Even if we know that Ferraris aren't reliable, even if we know that they aren't the greatest car ever, in some people's opinion, I think it is an in club that people want to be, right? I There's a TikTok audio which I don't know why I'm referencing, but it's it's relevant. It's kind of this idea of why you can't even why are you hating from outside the club because you can't get in? And so it's this thing of because you're not in the club, I think it's very easy to point at it and say like this is not good. I don't like this car, never buy it. But if I had the money, I mean, why wouldn't I buy it and why wouldn't I show my money off? Um, so I think that's the big argument around Ferrari. And maybe I'm a bit of a consumerist, a hyper consumerist, because I want a Ferrari. But they're nice cars, they're gorgeous. And if I ever get $100,000, I'm definitely buying a Ferrari Testarossa because that car is adorable. So here are my references, and thank you so much for watching.